Rounding out the trio of Gen 2's legendary beasts is Johto's resident fire legendary, Entei. Now, funnily enough, this actually almost didn't happen, because certain quote-unquote derpy Pokemon were actually almost voted in and amassed a high number of votes seemingly out of nowhere. The reason to this is I honestly have no idea. I mean, it's not like derpy Pokemon have ever interrupted a trio on this channel before. No sir, none of that here. Anyway, Entei is a special case among the legendary beasts. It doesn't have the competitive fame of the other two, but it is a movie star. Ever since its role as the main legendary Pokemon of the third Pokemon movie, as a fierce illusion conjured up by the fiendish unknown, it's had a place in fans' hearts. And to be fair, this movie is actually one of the better movies in my opinion, so if you're a fan of Pokemon, I'd check it out. Anyway, since it's known for its multiple ties to volcanoes, let's explore if Entei could really erupt in the competitive world. So, how good was Entei actually? And in this video, we'll be covering these competitive formats. Now, much to the dismay of fans everywhere, Entei does not live up to its legendary status in its debut generation, despite some actually impressive stats. Granted, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it still resides firmly in the tier of not worth bringing to a tournament game. In other words, it's a gimmick. It packs a set of Sunny Day, Fire Blast, Solar Beam, and Hidden Power fighting, but unfortunately that Hidden Power fighting cuts into its DVs because of how Hidden Power works in that generation, which makes it less effective. But it is both a necessary evil in order to beat back Tyranitar, who doesn't really mind solar beams, and also to have a solid move to hit Snorlax decently outside of Sun, and generally because it just doesn't have many better options. It also just doesn't hurt to have a 100% accurate attacking move for any given situation either. This niche of Sunny Day is an interesting one in GSC overuse, with Thunder being so popular on electric types to hurt the mighty Snorlax and get crucial paralysis on Raikou. Its already meager accuracy being lowered to a paltry 50% thanks to the change of the weather can be a game breaker. Plus, the dangerous Vaporeon can be held off much more easily if its serves are halved in power. When it comes to Pokemon that viably use it, Houndoom is often the first one that comes to mind because it already has utility in utterly destroying the always popular Exeggutor and the newly popular Jinx with Pursuit, running off its excellent special attack and still has the room to fit Sunny Day and Solar Beam. However, Houndoom's pathetic physical bulk means it completely folds to Snorlax and Tyranitar. Moltres is the next one on the roster who can also possibly run Sunny Day. With a massive special attack stat equal to the fearsome Zapdos, with spikes, Moltres can even 2-hit KO Snorlax, but it lacks the ability to use the Sunny Beams, which means it has a lot of trouble dealing with rocks and water types. But it's still a decent choice for a Sunny Day user because its Fire Blast is often powered even further by Charcoal, which makes it so nuclear that it often gets by on raw power, which isn't too common in the GSC metagame overall. Moltres also has the ability to run a great Rest Talk set that deals with Jinx and Nidoking swimmingly. Also, fun fact, in GSC, one doesn't have to wait for a weather condition to run out before setting it up again. So Sleep Talking Sunny Day can just extend the pain. So with those two choices in mind of Houndoom and Moltres as Sunny Day sweepers, we finally come to Entei, which is unfortunately the lowliest of the Sunny Day Pokemon. Its stature among them matching its special attack stat. But what unique role does it have? First off, it has by far the best bulk out of the three. It's never 2-hit KO'd by Zapdos' Thunder, and a Sunny Fire Blast has solid odds to 2-hit KO it back. The odds to 2-hit KO Raikou are significantly worse, but Raikou is infamous for its vulnerability to spikes and uncomfortably being forced to rest. Snorlax is just about always 3-hit KO'd by a Sunny Blast with spikes down, and that isn't exactly hard for Entei to actually do, given how much Snorlax uses rest. Hidden Power fighting can even force a rest outside of the sun for its teammates to take advantage of, and thanks to its great bulk, it isn't terrified of Snorlax's attacks. Entei also has the unique attribute of a high attack stat, which allows it to not be completely blanked in the event it faces a Blissey. And as stated earlier, it runs right through Tyranitar while also not crumpling to a single rock slide. However, it must be stressed, this is what Entei can do, but usually it doesn't do this because it isn't used that much. The whole handling Snorlax one-on-one thing is usually done better by Moltres, and Hidden Power fighting is nice and all, but with a strategy like Sunny Day, it's better to focus on doing what's being done as well as possible. So most of the time, if you are using Entei, you're actually beating as much of what you naturally can, rather than an overextended attempt to cover everything. That will nearly never work and is easy to play around. What all of this means is that it's usually just better to have support from Moltres against its weaknesses like Tyranitar, the Waters, and Blissey than it is to run Entei. Unless you're really ambitious and adamant about getting Entei to work, which he can, but he is very high maintenance compared to Moltres. And unfortunately, Entei is too good for underuse, so unless a new use is found for him, he's stuck in limbo, aka borderline, forever. Now on to Gen 3. In the advanced generation, Entei is unique for being the only fire type to learn Calm Mind, but unfortunately our fiery friend is just as unviable as it was before. A swath of Pokemon that naturally destroyed it rose to the forefront of the metagame, like Blissey, Aerodactyl, Dugtrio, Skarmory gaining not just spikes but 3 layers of spikes, and of course not just Tyranitar, but Tyranitar and its now permanent Sandstorm that assured Entei's survivability was extraordinarily limited. It was also required to run Hidden Power Grass not just for waters like Swampert and Suicune, but for Tyranitar itself, and that move slot taken up by it left it also destroyed by Salamence and Flygon. Its special attack was so puny that it even struggled to kill the Pokemon that a fire type should theoretically be good against, like Celebi, Jirachi, Skarmory, and Metagross. Plus, it now had new competition in other offensive fires, like Moltres, Charizard, Camerupt, and Houndoom, who all had unique roles that they could perform in spite of the counters, and could naturally work their way around some of them. Moltres and Charizard were immune to Spikes, Earthquake, and Arena Trap, and both Moltres and Houndoom got Will-O-Wisp, while Charizard had moves like Focus Punch, Dragon Claw, and its ability Blaze, which went well with the Pataya Berry. Camerupt was immune to Electric, neutral to Ice and Grass, and it also got Explosion and Stab Earthquake, whereas Entei couldn't generate much more offensive force beneath the surface of its Fire plus Grass coverage, as Calm Mind wasn't ever going to fix the myriad of issues it possessed except on the luckiest and rarest of occasions. So with all of this, Entei was actually still stuck in limbo because it couldn't find a unique role amongst the other fire types, but it was still too strong for underused. And with the additions of the truly top tier fire types in Infernape and Heatran, who notably weren't weak to Stealth Rock and had a multitude of effective weapons, Entei never stood a chance. It was finally no longer too strong for underuse. On the contrary, for the longest time, this legendary beast was outclassed by the legendary Pokemon, Arcanine. Despite the higher attack and speed stats, Arcanine did everything better than Entei by miles. It had 2 amazing abilities to choose from, like Intimidate and Flash Fire, and had instant recovery with Morning Sun, and better moves in Flare Blitz and Extreme Speed. It could effectively run a plethora of offensive and defensive sets that were just better, and it was for that reason Arcanine was the main face of the fire component in the tier's famous Fire, Water, Grass cores. Now, one of the ways Entei could separate itself from Arcanine was its access to Calm Mind. While still completely destroyed by Haze Milotic, its 101 HP substitutes and pressure ability could give some teams relying on Chansey serious headaches, while Hidden Power Grass could deal high damage to less bulky waters and Rhyperior. However, it was still a fringe pick that paled in usage next to Arcanine's superior and varied utility. However, later on in DPP's lifespan, Entei finally experienced some salvation with the Shiny event that gave it Flare Blitz and Extreme Speed, 2 moves that Arcanine had previously had over it, plus the locked nature that the event provided was fortuitously adamant, which could not have been more of a perfect fit, and it even gained Lava Plume, which is an excellent physical attack thwarting weapon for special variants to use. Even a burn on walls such as Chansey and Milotic could give a player an extra weapon to deal with. But anyways, access to those 2 big moves in Extreme Speed and Flare Blitz finally let it shine as a physical attacker, with not just its higher attack, but also with its access to Stone Edge to use against the fellow fire types, especially Moltres. But of course, even after all of this, Arcanine proved to be overall the more solid choice thanks to its utility. But Entei at least ended the generation with significantly more viability than it started with. So at least there's that. And right now it's currently sitting in the never used ban list. So not quite never used, but yeah. And on to the weather generation. I mean, we talk about this every time this generation shows up, but yeah, it's got permanent rain, permanent sand, dragons, Heatran, Terrakion, and all those other stuff, which means no one ever had any delusions about Entei and overuse. There have been a lot of attempts at lower tier Pokemon as gimmicks and overuse, but unless someone accidentally hit the OU ladder with an RU team, Entei was usually never one of them. And while underuse didn't have permanent sand, it still resembled the previous generation of overuse, with its numerous water types and Flygon Smogon naturally dealing with Entei easily. Now, Entei did manage to play similarly to the previous generation in a decent fashion, but it wasn't all that common thanks to the brutal presence of the other fire types like Victini, Darmanitan, Chandelure, and once again Arcanine, and also there's new counters to it, like Snorlax, Intimidate Quillfish, Eviolite Gligar, and even Umbreon. Entei eventually dropped to rarely used, where it became absolutely excellent and a face of the tier. Now this tier, funnily enough, was often compared to Diamond and Pearl underused, except this time there was no Arcanine as its competition, so Entei finally didn't have much in its way and could fully show what it was capable of. Entei's Choice Band set had a blend of power and speed that threatened a large variety of Pokemon, including the plethora of grass types in the tier, as well as other frail Pokemon such as Cryogonal and Sigilyph, and thus was constantly on everyone's threat list throughout the generation. It could even effectively run Sleep Talk to absorb Spore from Amoonguss and remain threatening, but of course it wasn't unstoppable in the tier because Pokemon such as Slowking, Alomomola, and Druddigon naturally gave it a tough time, though it could always find ways around them. The Substitute and Calm Mind sets still existed and weren't bad, especially with the rise of Alomomola, but the Choice Band sets were so consistently effective, it was tough to go against them. So even the big pink fish was a toxic away from being quite annoyed by repeated assaults. And in the 6th generation, Entei got Ho-Oh's signature move, Sacred Fire, and this meant some ambitious players even tried out Choice Band and Assault Vest sets in overuse, in addition to the move Bulldoze, which isn't quite like using Earthquake, but it was still doing the job against Heatran while potentially having utility in lowering and opposing Pokemon speed such as Keldeo. And of course, Extreme Speed's priority is highly valuable. Its impact in overuse didn't last outside of a very minor stretch in XY, but it was the first time Entei had ever seen real play in overuse, and that could be seen as a victory in itself, even though it is minor. It was the first and likely last time you could feasibly use all 3 legendary beasts on the same team and not have it be a gimmick. And this same vicious Sacred Fire Choice Bander set found itself as a consistent threat throughout the generation in underuse, which is notable because that means Entei actually jumped up from a lower tier from the previous generation, and usually by this time in a Pokemon's career, they either stay the same or drop further and further like Milotic and regular Kangaskhan. It could even run both Sacred Fire and Flare Blitz on the same set, choosing which one to use depending on if it wanted to shoot for the burn or if it needed its attack to have more kick, as well as not having to worry about Sacred Fire's rather underwhelming 8 PP. While it never busts its way through a rest Suicune, it was still a great Pokemon in underuse. And now for VGC, in VGC 2015, Entei unfortunately couldn't use Flare Blitz and Extreme Speed, and of course it still faced very real competition from Arcanine, who possessed one of Double's best abilities in Intimidate, but it still had Sacred Fire for burn spreading alongside its new move Snarl, which meant it could support its team by crippling both sides of the spectrum. Stone Edge also separated it from Arcanine, giving it a way to rip Talonflame and Charizards apart. It's incredibly high HP and decent defenses, in addition to having a plethora of great items to choose from, like Leftovers, Shuka Berry, Assault Vest, Safety Goggles, and more, meant it could tank a few hits and stick around, with partners like Scrafty in mid for solid defensive cores. And yes, this means Entei actually had a decent amount of notable placements for VGC 2015. For regional placements, we got Michael Lenzano, who reached 6th with it at Massachusetts, and Lightcore, who got top 8 at Lancaster in the seniors division. And at Indonesia's first ever Premier Challenge, we got 6th place Ditto Amalzia, who also packed an Entei on his team as well. Moving on to nationals, more people tried using Entei, with Amin Solzer, who reached 12th at the Italian one, and in the United States, Steven Smigok reached 5th in the seniors division. But then coming to the big stage at Worlds, Entei was actually used 8 times for a total of 10% in uses, which isn't bad at all. And of all the Entei players who showed up at Worlds, there was one who actually made top 4, and his name is Naohito Mizubuchi, who actually managed to place that high without using a set with Snarl. His Entei actually possessed both Protect and Substitute, in addition to Stone Edge and Sacred Fire. This particular Entei threatens Amoonguss, Charizard Y, Aegislash with its coverage moves, as well as Mega Kangaskhan and Landorus T. The use of both Protect and Substitute means that Substitute was used to block Spore and Intimidate, as well as punishing his opponent's Protects by getting a free sub if he predicted correctly. And this is especially exciting because, you know, Entei's not exactly the Pokemon you'd expect to see in top 4 of Worlds. But somehow Entei managed to find its way at not quite stardom, but a solid place in the metagame at its most important stage. The good stuff to Naohito Mizubuchi, whose run was ended by the champion of that year, Shoma. And in Sun and Moon, sadly, there's no place for Entei in overuse. Now that everyone knew its choice band antics were definitely more at home in the lower tiers, it was never given a shot. Plus, the new Tapu Fini completely walled it, and Tapu Fini couldn't even get burned thanks to Misty Terrain. Not to mention, Toxapex didn't even care about being burned, since the residual damage was reverted back to its original red, blue, and yellow rate of 6%. This also hurt Entei in underuse, which now had Latias ruling the tier alongside many water types, including the dreaded Alomomola. And because of all this, it dropped to its former home of rarely used, but proved to be too powerful even there, and was thus banned. It's still viable and underused, but it isn't a common sight, and the dominance of Infernape and its many positives, including U-turn, Stealth Rock neutrality, and set variety, makes it tough competition for Entei. And in Gen 7 in VGC 2018, even its main competition, Arcanine, was now outclassed by the new intimidating fire type Incineroar. So we couldn't find any notable placements on it, unfortunately. Them's the breaks. And that's it. So how good was Entei actually? Not very would be being kind. Sure, it was decent to good in the lower tiers, and it actually had a decent 1 year of VGC, but overall it was just not that good. Unfortunately, Entei is one of the go-to examples to show that not all legendaries are unfair, but in fact some of them are downright bad. This is one beast you don't want to let out in the higher tiers, or he'll lower your odds of winning dramatically. So yeah, maybe Entei's strength was an illusion this whole time concocted by the unknown, just like in the movie. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False White Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content, and as always, as I always say, comment on what Pokemon you want to see next. Also, thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms, yada yada yada. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.